All right, so let's check the cricket scores. Serious,
I have a question about our talks.
Yes?
You said there would be discussions, be prepared to engage. Are we actually like driving discussions, or is it just...
It's just that humans could actually ask some questions from the audience, which would be very nice. Polite, kind, friendly, yeah. It also means turn up, don't, blow off your friends, yeah, or your compatriots. Yeah, that's really what it means, yeah. Let's see. So you all know about Kevin Peterson. I'm kidding. All right, well, we got to check this out. So Australia's playing Pakistan in the United Arab Emirates because you can't play cricket in Pakistan anymore, which is a shame. There are bigger things in sport, but that's the reason. Look at that, 101 for 5. Pakistan, dear oh dear. They can destroy you one day, another day they fall to pieces. All right, so I'll tell you some fun things. So we made this up, so we've gone from the hedonometer to the panometer, right? The panometer. So this is coming, we're gonna measure everything. So we figured out a way to make all kinds of bootstrap kinds of measures and so on. It costs lots of money to build these data sets that we use to measure things like happiness, which seems ridiculous, but it does cost a lot of money because you have to ask people how they feel about words in isolation, which is obviously a very silly thing to do, but it works pretty well. We've done that actually we've used another source for food and exercise. That's a different thing. But then we have a couple of other kinds of meters. So there's the ground truth meter, these will all come, and the bootstrap meter. Anyway, so we'll be measuring things like bored and sleep insufficiency, and according to Twitter. But these things correlate or can be based on CDC scores, so it's pretty good. Anyway, so I was very excited to find Panometer.org was so pan is all, right? Like that's the Greek root. Omniometer it's fun to say, but it would hurt maybe a little bit. That's the Latin piece. Yeah, that was sitting around. Yeah, it's $3,000 for the .com, but this guy was just free. Well, not much. And the Twitter handle, which is the all-important thing, right? You need the Twitter handle and the website. Google Plus, maybe not so much. And then some Facebook thing. Anyway, more little blog posts are going up here. So here's a fun thing. We're talking about networks. You can check these out if you haven't. I'm sure you look at this a lot. But anyway, so there's this sort of observation now that there are filaments of galaxies everywhere, right? So if you go up to the bigger scale, it looks like there's a network structure. So it's all networks, which is pretty bananas, actually. Yeah, so this is a story about it. Obviously, we get these things wrong horribly. There's all this stuff about dark matter and so on, and this is possibly not an actual real picture. But that's sort of the claim. Anyway, pretty interesting. I mean, super cool. Blog posts about hedonometer, which are great. Only took about 8 hours to write. And let's see, so there was also this. Oh yeah, so this article, oh gosh, where is this? There's a piece that appeared here. We're going to talk about this soon because we're going to talk about contagion, right? We're going to talk about biological contagion and social contagion. And this thing you will see over and over again, and it's kind of frustrating to see it keep coming up. So this is the idea that you can measure, and this is not just about contagion, this is about any kind of system story. We have this predilection for measuring it with one number. We want to know what the weather is, so we will say, let's have an effective temperature, right? So then we don't have to record, we don't have to tell you how humid it is and what temperature it is. We'll just say effective temperature. I mean, I know we still do say a lot of things, because we have to with weather, right? We have to say it's raining, or it's good to know these different pieces, or it's sunny or cloudy and so on. But here's an area where this has gone wrong, and it's gone wrong partly, actually completely because of a mathematical model from the 1920s. We'll get to it, where there really kind of was one number that governed the whole system. But it was about a random mixing model, which is not really how the world works, right? You're not randomly mixing people every day with respect to a disease. So the idea is that there's this thing called R0 or R0. I'll say R0 because of my origins. And that's the number of, the expected number of people that one person will infect if they have this thing. So here you have it, hepatitis C, 2, Ebola 2, SARS is 4, measles 18. Now all of these things are greater than 1, right? So, and it's, so if you infect so you infect 2 people with Ebola, then they infect 2 people each, right? That's really what's sort of where these models come from. It's exponential growth, right? It's all, well, it's bad, right? So it's like drive to Canada time, right? Always going to have that paper map of Canada. Okay, so, kidding. So let's see, New Zealand, that's really where you want to go. Okay, so, yeah, so this, and this is terrible, right? 18. So these are, of course, are numbers that have been estimated after the fact, which is a little bit of a treacherous business. So we'll talk about that when we come on. But anyway, this is just a couple of days ago, and it's totally wrong because it depends on the infectiousness of the disease, it depends on the contact patterns of the population, it depends on whether the disease is sneaky and waiting to infect people while the person isn't infected. Well, HIV, of course, is a terrible example of that, where people don't know and they can infect many people. Ebola classically is sort of used as almost, it's a terrible thing, it's almost used as sort of the joke extreme of a disease where you sort of instantly get it and you instantly die essentially. So it burns out very quickly. But it's become a little less dangerous. So that seems to be the story. So it's become a little less dangerous so it can persist a bit longer and more people can get infected. Anyway, so obviously that's rant territory and I'll get into it later on. Yeah. Okay. Oh yeah. Lots of other things. Anyway, tweeters. We have another paper coming that's related to the course in some way, and Pakistan have just lost another wicket. There you go. All right. Shahid Afridi. Oh, dear, dear. Okay. Let's go back to the course. Okay. And we have, I was going to bring in a pair to cut up, but that seemed like that was too much. All right. Various selections. Okay. Where are we? So, started to talk about the small world business. I gave you the whole background, and we went into this experiment. So I'm just going to sort of zip through and get back to where we were, and you can help me figure out where that was. And so these small world networks, which we'll see are basically all big networks, and it's not really a good idea to even ask about the galactic one, I suppose. Anyway, you'll see, it's about information and searching, really, ultimately. So the short paths have to exist, right? It has to be short ways to get between places for it to be a small world. And then you have to have people or whoever it is, ants or slime mold, whatever it is, they have to be good at finding those short paths. People do silly things with networks, right? So there is a slime mold simulation of the Tokyo subway, right? So they put out little food deposits and let the thing grow and it reproduce we'll talk about that later, the Tokyo subway pattern, which is to show it's efficient. Yeah. Well done, people. All right, so we ran this experiment, this is a little while ago, and I told you all these target people, and we had trouble getting them through, although people wanted to participate, though they would send on an email, but it's a very brittle thing because you only send it to one other person. You could send to many targets, but each target you got to send to one person. So your involvement was quite small. And we got to this point that the perception matters. So that's where we'll talk about this a little bit in some of the developments that came after with other work in this lecture. And so this point matters tremendously, right? So if you have, so Milgram's experiment had a 75% participation rate or a 25% attrition rate, and that it's an exponential thing, so 0.75 times 0.75, that's how many are left, after n steps. So it's dying away exponentially. So it matters. You have changes in these participation rates which seem to be pretty much independent of where you are in the chain, and which makes sense because if you're just getting an email or a letter out of the blue then from a friend, right, then you're no different to someone who's getting it at the 10th step or the 3rd step. Your experience is pretty similar. All right, okay. So there are a couple of details in here about that we went into. So and these are useful things. They connect to some very important early work in sociology or work that had come earlier. So successful to unsuccessful chains. And so this is a funny looking thing to look at, but so this is extremely close, very close, fairly close, close, not close. This is your estimation. So you send off your message to someone, and this is your estimation of how close you are to that person, right? So we asked them, how close are you to the person you're sending it to? You know, where did you meet them? We asked a bunch of questions like that. And then a person coming to the experiment had to verify that they knew that person for a start. And, you know, sometimes they'd say, no, I don't know who this is. But that was kind of the structure we had. But so basically, we asked everyone, you're sending it to someone, tell us some things about them. And so the chains that got through, which I told you were not so many, they tended to use weaker ties. And you may have heard this term, weak ties. It's a very famous observation made by Mark Granovetter in the early 70s. Yes, that, and I'll have another slide, that suggested that people it was about finding jobs, right? So finding jobs, and this is the early 1970s, right? We've got telephones and some other things that humans had back then, but newspapers, but there's no web. There are things with punch cards probably. The Commodore 64 was a dream at this point. Okay. Anyway, so we don't have that. But what he made this hypothesis, right? Or he conjectured and sort of backed this up with a lot of words, but also I believe some data that people who were finding jobs did better if they went for weaker ties. So they weren't just asking their family members or their closest friends; they were reaching out to people who were a little further away. So it should make sense. It's a reasonable thing to think, and it seems to be borne out in practice in lots of different examples. And here's just one of them, where in this search process, which is obviously very much allied, this particular search process is allied to search in general and searching for jobs. If you see these white bars, these are the strengths of the ties that people focused on when they were in the successful chain. So you can see there's a skew here, right? So this distribution, the white bars are pushed out this way a little more. So in a sense, people made a bit of a mistake if they were going for, you send it to your mom or your brother, it's a little too close. And it wasn't able to jump, right? We needed to move this thing along. So it's kind of like using a putter off the, golf is a terrible game, but I'm gonna use the analogy. Using a putter off the tee, right? Just very silly, unless you give it a good thwack, but it's just sort of the wrong thing. Okay, we will unfortunately come back to a golf analogy later on. It is unfortunately appropriate. All right, so let's see. So there are a couple of other things. As I said from that example, so weak ties, people who succeeded, who were part of successful chains, right? So they're not in control of the whole thing. They're part of a successful chain. Weak ties, they use professional ties. So if we ask them, what kind of relationship is this? Disproportionately, it was professional. The ties, where did you first meet this person? Well, there are older ones. Well, it's work and college rather than family, say, right? And they focused on the targets. There are two things, really. They focused on geography and then their workplace. Very reasonable, and there's still work being done on this kind of understanding how people go about this navigation. And disproportionately, right, they avoided, these were not the first things they said, right? So we asked them what's the most important thing. So we didn't ask them we could have done more in that sense. But again, this is a horrible website run by maniacs. Hubs. So this is sort of the term, we'll use this again. Are you sending it because they have lots of friends? Are you going to just send it to your mate over here because they have a ton of friends and maybe they'll know someone? So it's sort of a bit like giving up, right? Or it's a bit of a Hail Mary. So to use a reference to a sport I don't really understand. Okay, so funnels, that is the term that Milgram used and has gone away because he noticed in his experiment, or possibly a graduate student noticed, and then he wrote about it. So there's a target person, and the messages, I think 90% of the messages came in along from 3 friends of the target person. So lots of people were sending in, as this very inspirational sketch shows, lots of people were sending in messages to 3 people who are then like, oh yeah, okay, right? So the understanding of social fabric, it's still very difficult, but we didn't have lots and lots of data at that point. So this was sort of a conjecture about not just the social structure, but how it might work dynamically, if you're getting things to move around. So that didn't seem to pop up on ours, or at least that's not what people thought they were doing. And this is the connection here, right? So the family and friends, it's sort of a little further away from, so it's more professional ties. And people hone in on geography, so you get it to Indonesia or to New York City or wherever the destination is. You try and get the message into the city and then sort out the workplace. Right. So this was a big success. I mean, this paper was published in Science, and people keep citing it, which is very kind of them. And as I said, it's a messy experiment, but these things are really hard to run. People have tried to do others. I'll talk about one other later on when we come to FAME that was also a success, but certainly there have been a lot that have crashed and burned and not worked out, just as websites do in general, right? Google+. Okay, so, it's so beautiful. Let's see, so this was about the choices that people made, right? So this is the algorithmic choices they made. The thing that didn't seem to matter, and this is interesting, you can make a case, it really didn't matter that much. There wasn't too much dependence on the demographics of the individuals involved, right? So, there's a little bit of variation, but nothing like the variation that you see for the choices of choosing others. So there wasn't too much variation, again, for age and gender, both, the whole gamut of ages did pretty well, for example. Didn't really matter what we asked people what their income brackets were. Religion, relationship of recipient. There's some variation. It tends to kind of skew in the way you might think. So people who have lots of money are in the tech industry and so on, and a Norwegian, they did a little bit better than other people, but it wasn't a massive variation. And so, as I said before, there was this 37%. It's really about compliance. That's the fraction of people who would participate. It's 30 to 40 when you sort of break it down and look at different demographics. Exciting? It's pretty cool. All right, so these weren't great for sending things on, as I said, right? There were two choices. One was they have lots of friends, and that's the hub thing. Also, they're likely to continue the chain. We gave them just this other choice, which is, maybe they'll sort of kick it a little further on. I'm just kicking it over them, and then they can just kick it a little more. So it mattered. The specificity. People were really, actually excited about this experiment. Facebook didn't exist, so they had something to do. The people were, capitalizing on the information in front of them. All right, cool. So this was all pretty good. Let's see. There are a couple of numbers that came out of it. We have to think about this a little bit. So we had an average of 4, just over 4 for all completed chains. So that's our 4 degrees of separation story. Right. And again, this is about chains that succeed, that are found. So we have to, we can think about that a little bit. Harrison White is a very famous sociologist who got himself a PhD in physics, I think lasers or something like this in the 1950s, and then thought, I'm going to do sociology. So then he went off, and many heads of departments and all sorts of characters around the country his students now. Right? Now he was at Columbia. He used to hang out with us and argue about things, which was kind of fun. Let's see. So he did some work after Milgram, saying, well, all right, Milgram had this distribution of chains, but there's some underlying distribution. If everyone was going to participate, right? We're giving everyone $1,000. Send it on. We're going to deposit it into your Amazon or whatever, right? All easy. Do it very nicely. Then they're like, sure, and they'll make all these zombie accounts and take all your money away, right? But if we could get people to participate genuinely, there would be some distribution of successful chains like that. So it's going to be further out. Right? This is this attrition thing. So one that might take 20 links to get to, if everyone's really participating, there's no hope at all because someone's going to drop the ball, right, somewhere along here. There's only 1 in 100,000 will get through to 10 steps. So toast, right? So I guess it's 1 in 10 to the 10 would make it this far. All right, so, but what you can do is you can say, well, we know the attrition rate, so we can kind of just lift this up by saying, well, if this is 10 steps, then 1 in 100,000 got through, then we'll just, we'll multiply it up by a factor to show how many we originally would have had and so on. So we can mess around with this a little bit. You can't get the mean out very well like this because eventually you go to zeros. Right? So you can't sort of estimate, none of them got through 20 steps. You can't estimate how many that came from. You just don't have a way of doing that. But you can say, well, I know how many started, and if I can get to a point where I can see half of them, then I'll have the median. So you can estimate the median. And so that's what we went on to do, and we just, of course, now it's going to be an integer. So within countries, median was about 5, and ones where you had a target in a different country, and of course that's a pretty broad thing. I mean, those countries could be near each other on the other side of the earth, 7. And then if you put them all together, you still get 7. A Milgram, if you do this thing that, as I said, Harrison White did, I should link to him, you get 9. So in some sense, in this median sense, the 6 degrees of separation that Milgram found you could sort of suggest was actually really 9 degrees of separation, right? Because some people drop out. Okay. All right, that's may seem like a detail. Facebook came along a few years ago and ended up with a 4, but they weren't doing anything like search. They were just saying, I've got a giant network, we're just going to find the shortest path between every pair of people and average them. We'll find the average shortest path. That's different to what this is, right? This is very different to this. This is the average path length of successful message chains, which is a dynamic algorithmic piece on top of this structure. Okay. All right, so this is all very good. Made an experiment, showed that it kind of works. And we'll get to some theory later on to try and understand how this works, because it's a big deal. I mean, people are searching, well done people, like why are they doing that? And also it's to do with identity, which is all very good. Connects into information in general and knowledge in general. Yep. So let's think about what we could do with this. So I told you about how we had these ideas of, find a friend, find a lost friend sort of thing, which we sort of felt might end up as, stalker.com if it went wrong. So we kind of backed off on that one. So, we had some ideas, but never really, built anything. So, can you use it for some good thing or some evil thing, of course, as well? It's good to know what you're doing, right? So it's possible. What are the good and bad things we can do with this? So you can think of this as a socio-inspired algorithm. There's lots of bio-inspired computational stuff. Right? We get excited about what's going on in someone's head, and then we get neural networks, which is, of course, some tremendous lifting from what the real thing is, but they do things for us. Little genetic algorithm business, why not? Biology, We're silly enough to even get trapped a bit where we want it to be like real evolution too much. And you're like, no. Inspiration is good, now you can do whatever you want with it, But it is funny to hear, sometimes you hear that, like, no, well, it should just, you have to mate, and then, no, you have a computer. Okay, let's see. No physics. Okay, so we'll talk about that later on. So obviously we have this incentives problem. If we're gonna use it for anything, good or bad, we know we have an incentives problem. How do you get people to send a message on to some friend of theirs? I mean, this is obviously getting close to marketing, right? Marketing is all about, which we will talk about quite a bit, I suppose. But basically, I can explain to you how to market things successfully for free. It's not easy. You want to manipulate humans into telling each other about this thing. Word of mouth, right? So you see terrible efforts to do this over and over again once you realize what they're doing. We will talk about influence quite a bit. I mean, it's incredibly, incredibly important. Okay, so we have the incentives problem. So what kind of, some sort of influence algorithm thing would help stuff, propagate? Now, if it's an obvious social good, right? You're helping, and we have very dramatic things where you're trying to find a bad person, or you're trying to find a lost child or something like that, and people we've set up Amber Alerts and so on, so we have ways of broadcasting and then getting people involved. But there's also this kind of word of mouth part. A lot of that is you do what you can in a broadcasting way, right? So you have a TV, you have the web, you can put ads up. That's you as the giant sort of mouthpiece. That's what you think you can do. You know, you're Oprah, you say go and do all this, right? But you also want people to talk about it themselves, right? You want people to, right? If it's really a good thing, they'll be getting each other involved. I mean, there are lots. I mean, politics, this is the plan. Religion, this is the plan. You know, there's all sorts of ways of trying to get this to work. A lot of them are hilariously bad. So what do? Well, you can make it fun. Now, our thing kind of worked because it was sort of enjoyable, which seems remarkable, but at the time, I suppose it was, because there was no social media. Again, we're not quite smart enough. Like a long way away from being smart enough. We could give them money, but that seems like that could be dangerous. There's the whole gaming of the thing. Yes, I am this person, and this person, and this person, and this person. Pay all of them. Prestige is good, right? This is, you know, people can feel good about it. And you want it to be non-gameable. You want it to be a game, but non-gameable. Let's say that. All right, so here's an example that popped up, ended up in Science magazine, which was one success, but certainly the biggest was probably being on the Colbert Report. You know, there's published in Science and Nature, there's Nobel Prize, and there's being on the Colbert Report. Anyway, so personal opinion. Let's see, so 1969, the internet comes into existence, right? The web, kind of get that one together about 23 years later. But it was pretty cool. It was just 4 nodes having a little chat. It was called the ARPANET, which sounds a lot like DARPA because it is like DARPA. So they were pretty proud of themselves. And so for the 40-year anniversary, lots of good things were born in this year. Let's see, so, well, Unix is there too. So we have Unixy things. Yeah, a grand network challenge. So grand challenges, right? These are, yeah, all sorts of grand challenges get put together, and some of them are more grand than others. But this is the idea of like, when you know, put man on the moon. There you go. Of course, it was man, but let's put humans on the moon. That was a grand challenge for the 1960s. Also, another one was not having large civilizations collapse. That's always a good one. But you know, we have these very specific ones we lay out, and we say, let's do it. And these are decoding the genome, you know, another grand challenge type thing. You know, defending Europe. All right, so we have these things. This one, so there's a frame for these grand challenges. And you know, actually a pretty cool thing would be to come up with the next one. That would be a good grand challenge finding, right? So you could make an automated grand challenge thing. This is a sort of madness that computer scientists like. All right, so, okay, so this is 2009. Okay, so it is, yeah, it's all right, 5 years ago. DARPA did this. They put up 10 so think about this. They put up 10 red weather balloons, I think only about 10 to 15 feet in the air. They're big, they're 10 feet across, something like this. But you're not going to see them from space, right? But they're a decent size. But they're not 1,000 feet in the air. They're tethered to the ground, and I think they're sort of 10, 20 feet in the air. And there's a little thing on the side that gives its location, its coordinates. You know, it's lat long. Okay, so these things appear. They're up for the day. They're just up for the day. So here's the thing. Think about how you would solve this problem. These things are up for the day. There are 10 balloons. They are around the US, just the 48 states, anywhere. You're told this game well in advance. People knew about it at least 6 months in advance, and people were preparing in all sorts of ways, right? May have been a year in advance. So we're going to have this day. We're going to put up 10 balloons anywhere in the 48 states, and you have to find them using whatever you like. But the internet is this thing that we have and the web on top of it. This is this thing that we would like you to harness with the people, right? So 8-foot diameter, there you go. So there you had to find the Latin line, and you would get $40,000, right? So that's a pretty good game, right? It's where's Wally gone berserk? And the website they had, you just put in the lat lon, right? So you had 10 entries. You put in lat lon, press go, and if you were wrong, you're wrong. It didn't say these ones are right and these ones are right and these ones are, you know, as I understand it, just said no. That's it. So you could play a game where you put in every permutation of, that's not going to work out, right? So there's a lot of, it's a big search space. So how do you do this? This is pretty hard. What's that? Oh, okay, all right. Well, I'll tell you my thing. So I guess, yeah, okay, there are some good things in here. So let's see. So this is actually where they were, and in general they were in parks. No one cares about Canada, apparently. There wasn't any, you know, I think they are suspiciously close to certain places. All right, so, but, you know, Union Square. So it's standing, a lot of people walk past, well, there's a red, I mean, there's a, you know, and then there's probably, I don't know, a giant cube next to it, and someone dressed as a, you know, pineapple. I mean, so you know, there's sort of, like, whatever, right? So people don't necessarily know what it is, but there are people searching for it. And as I said, teams that have been formed over many months. All right, so where else? Yeah, so Miami, I think some of them, I don't know how, yeah, I mean, they're all in cities, all right.
The one in Portland is like straight in the middle of downtown.
Yeah, they put them in towns, yeah, all right.
You see it from everywhere.
Yeah. So, but it's like, what's this bullet, right? And then if you figure it out, I guess you could do a little Googling, you could find it out. Then your job is to, how do you find the rest of them? Or how do you then participate, you know? Yeah. So they put them up, and they're up for one day, then they take them down, and that's it. They're not going to put them up again, right? So there are pretty wide estimates as to how long people thought it would take for this to be figured out, ranging from maybe that day or to like never. You know, like no one's going to get this. This is a pretty tough search problem. All right. So it turns out, I was down at MIT giving a talk actually just after they won this. So there was a whole sort of business going on, and they were worried it was a Ponzi scheme, that it would be seen to be a Ponzi scheme. So that's an important aspect. It wasn't. So the Media Lab won it. Here's the paper that came out later on. Sounds very good, right? Time-critical social mobilization. So you want to get the whole team on board about, you know, whatever it is. So again, this could be evil or good, usual sort of thing. I mean, most of our social things are, right? Words can be used for evil or good. So here was the thing they did. So they virally recruited people. They incentivized people to recruit and to search. So they managed to do both of these things at once. So they, in a sense, solved this problem that we'd put forward. So people wanted to, okay, so I'll tell you the algorithm. People wanted to find the balloons, and they certainly wanted to involve more people, so it benefited too. So here's this recursive structure they put in. You get a decaying payout. Is that? Yeah, okay, that's right. So there's $40,000, $4,000 for each balloon. So if you find a balloon, if you're the one who reports the balloon, you're the one who sent, because MIT, these guys made a website. If you're the one, you start your own account there, and you put in the latitude and longitude, and that becomes the one that they use in a successful, if they win the competition, then you get $2,000. If you were recruited by someone, and you're the successful one, the person who recruited you by sending emails or blasting you with things, you know, no one calls anyone, you know, tweeting about it or just even mentioning it on the website, and you saw it, then you go, right? So they had a little thing so you say, oh, go to this website, and you give them a little link. So they'd see who referred them, right? Then you get 1,000, you get a 500 if you recruited the person who recruited the finder, 500, so this is going to be a little geometric series. It's not a Ponzi scheme, but it sure sounds like one. And if you watch the Colbert piece, that is, so here's the victory, Colbert interviews Riley Crane. That's one of the first questions he asked, like, how is this not a Ponzi scheme? They were prepared for this. They were a bit worried about it. Yeah. There is, I mean, you could recruit yourself, and the worst you could do is you find the balloon, you put in the correct thing. Well, before you put in the correct thing, you just go make a string of accounts and recruit yourself, which is a little bit naughty. But so you could maybe double your money, I suppose. You'd have to be very sneaky. What's that?
Somebody's going to report the balloon while you're recruiting yourself.
Yeah, you could make it. Yeah, it could all go wrong. Yeah. So what else? A few things happened. So you have, right, so 4,000 per balloon. So that's sort of, there's a limit on this. You have very clear incentives, right? You want to find the balloon, but you also want to involve more people, right? You get a benefit, just go and tell everyone. So that's good. It's gameable, right? Maybe a little gameable, but there's a real limit to that. So there are a bunch of things here. Let me perhaps go back and say, the way this worked is, I'll say it here. So the brand helped, right? MIT's doing the searching for balloons, so they were able to, blast their own little story, put it out, put it under. Did Reddit exist? Things like that. Reddit. Send their message out and say, they made a nice little website. They hacked it together. It was pretty good. So that helped. That definitely helps. Some terribly galling part of it is they only heard about it a couple of days before the balloons went up. So that really put the hurt on a number of teams. So there are a whole bunch of groups that were doing this. MIT found it in 9 hours, but if you look at this, how everyone else was doing, and this is now, that ended up being in their paper, there were teams that had found 9 or 8. There were a bunch some that had found 8, some that had found 7. So many other teams had gotten a long way. They were well into it. And they had different strategies. So, you can start to compare them. And a little bit of luck, they might have lost, right? And then the next team is the one that is the superheroes, and their strategy is the genius one. So one has to be. Nick had a question.
Was like, how alien was their strategy? Were they all social media?
Yeah, we'd have to look it up. Top of my head, I can't tell you too much about them, but there were some variations. Yeah, there was definitely strong recruiting drives that were done for months in advance, like building up kind of armies of things. But they managed to get this somewhat viral thing going. Well, I'll tell you one more. Yeah.
What team was behind MIT?
Okay, so we have to look at the paper. Do you want me to do that? You really want to know about it? Yeah. Okay. Let's see if my thing works. It's probably in there.
Oh.
See, there's a Georgia Tech. Do they rank them in this thing? I don't know if they do. I think it might be in the supplementary, which I'm not prepared to dig into. Power laws, of course, people. Right? Tree depth, probability of, so you can look at that. Yep. Kleinberg. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so a variant of the query incentive network model of Kleinberg, who I've mentioned, I'll mention him again. So you can see it's based on this. So they solved that incentive problem. So the connection to our work is that, so you'll see it, it's this paper here, is that I believe it was one of them, Riley Crane, I think, found out about this and wrote an email to everyone else at the Media Lab saying, does anyone know how to recruit people, like how to do this or whatever? And someone just wrote back, I've seen him give a talk, he does this, he actually has his email, because this is a big success for him, so of course. He has the email in his talk, which just has someone just put a link to this paper, right, our paper on the experiment, where we say, the incentive thing is the big problem. And they're like, oh ho, so they solved it. Yeah, so you could dig into this if you want to find the others. See how Pakistan's doing? Yeah. Umar Akmal's pretty good. All right, so, sorry. Let's go back here. It's good sociology citations in here, by the way. Yeah. It's all a bit hidden, I guess, but they're there. Okay, so that's how it started. And they're like, okay, good, we know how to do that. We're terrifically capable. So is that thing just dead? Is this little piece of nonsense, does it work? All right, fun thing to watch, 7 minutes, you can enjoy this. What else did they do? Blah, 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 blah. Extra notes. A number of other teams did well, so is that. What's that link? Ooh. Oh, this is the thing. I'll have to find that for you. It's disappeared. Does their little website exist anymore? Oh, something made by DARPA doesn't exist anymore. Okay, all right. It's a little sad. Okay. They're all about existence and de-existence, I guess. All right, so let's see. So a number of other teams did well. I'll have to fix that. I should have slept it off the, what's it called? The Forever machine? No, what's it, the Wayback Machine? Right, the thing that records it, yeah. I have to go and hunt around in that now. Yeah, so, right, go and look at the other strategies, and that's what they did in this paper in some detail, but yeah. Always fun to look at a paper on the screen, try and find things. Okay. Yeah, collective detective. So this was the term I came up with back in the day. You know, that's what this small world business was about. You have a collective detective, which, you know, could be a stalker if you're not careful. Ooh, food time. I don't have the little I have just a massive block of chocolate this time. It does have nuts in it. I'm going to have to pass this off to the team. What's that? Yeah, Trader Joe's is helping us out here. Many years we had to wait for Trader Joe's. Anyway, so I do have these things. You want to avoid these. Also pineapples. Nuts. See? All you have to do is survive 45 minutes. All right, let me tell you about this little bit. So that was a big success. So the MIT, or the Red Balloon Challenge, was a big success. It was surprising how well they did. And it opened up all these possibilities, right? So as they put it, social mobilization. How do you get a large number of people to do something? Now, obviously, if there's a sort of existential crisis for a country, then people will band together and, you know, serve the greater good if it's been well sort of, you know, made clear through history or whatever it is. But you can imagine, yeah, solving other kinds of things that maybe people it's not obvious to them. All right. Okay, so, yeah, you know, there's the classic, have you seen this person stuff, right? Let's go and find the bad guy thing, like printing out the such and such call. There's a little that kind of word of mouth sort of thing. That's finding a panda that ran away in, I think, in Washington. So I have a quote or two in this one. This is Philip Ball, who I've mentioned a few times. So he wrote a piece after the Boston bombings, you know, talking about this, the Reddit, what happened with Reddit. And I guess many of you will know this, right? But there was basically what becomes, you know, what in retrospect was sort of a disaster where they pinned it on different people. You know, one was a Brown University student who tragically had died, and I think, and yeah. So you know, this looked bad. However, you know, I think somewhere like Reddit, and it'll be interesting to see how they do in the future with this sort of thing, if there is this kind of need for it. You know, if they organize themselves in a better way, right? Better sort of curation, better kind of monitoring, and you know, requiring people to find and really cite sources and so on. Yeah, they did a good job, I think it was Reddit, when the videos were released. They were pretty good at, you know, because basically they just have a lot of people who are just crazy and combing through video. They were able to find all the relevant portions of security cameras, right? So they were maligned a bit, but I think, you know, very powerful kind of service, which again could be good and bad, right? So if Reddit decides you're a bad actor, and you know, you're in trouble, whether you're a bad actor or not. So okay, so collective detective, yeah. I think I have the Twitter handle for that one. All right. Important first step. Making a giant company. Okay, so all right, so we've had experiments, we've had kind of real world, practical algorithm, behavior, getting it done. And then, or the red balloon version, and then something like Reddit and any other sort of hunt for people business, or pandas. So it gets, we seem to be good at it. We can make mistakes, but we seem to be able to do it in the first place, which is a bit surprising. All right, so how do we understand it? So we've talked a little bit about random networks, and you have some work to do on them in the next week. One of the things about random networks is that the average path length grows logarithmically as the number of nodes, right? So they're branching locally. One way to think about it is there's some average degree in the network, and it's not quite like this, but we'll get to these details later on. But locally, random networks look like branching networks because the chance that your friends know each other is very low, right? So they have low clustering. So you quickly, as you move away from some center node in a random network, on average, you typically collect lots of people, right? It grows exponentially. Your neighborhood grows exponentially in number. The number of other nodes that are 1 step away, 2 steps away, 3 steps away, that grows exponentially. So it's higher than any kind of dimensional thing. And so you'll quickly hoover up all the nodes as you move away from 1. So you can see on the other hand, on the flip side of that is that the average distance between any two nodes is growing logarithmically. And as this is a well-known result, and as a population size, so as you make bigger and bigger random networks, they grow very slowly in terms of the average shortest path. So that's a small world feature, right? So they have something that's appealing. They have an aspect that's appealing. But they don't have any local socialness. There's no your friends don't know each other, so they're missing that. And the problem is, as soon as you start to add this in, you can end up with, they're too structured and they start to get bigger. Okay, we'll get to that. So you need clustering, which is just a simple example. So we talked about clustering. You need that. So here's your center, and so a number of their friends know each other along the dashed lines. That's a natural thing. And as we move to the other extreme, this is an extremely non-random network. Then we easily get lots of nice clustering, right? Clustering is a feature of a non-random kind of structure, all right? So randomness gives us short distances, but then we kind of want a highly non-random, low entropy kind of aspect to the network to give us clustering. So the question is, how do we find these? How do we sort of think about models of these networks? Okay, so in this case, A to B, right, so there's a long distance. If you wanted to send a message from A to B, in this network as it stands, if they know the whole layout, so there are a couple of things. If they know the whole layout, for some reason, maybe this is actually where they live physically, right? And you have to walk over here and pass to this person, walk over here and pass to this person, and so on. Then you'll get it to B. You'll know how to do it, but it'll take 10 steps. Slow, right? And the ball could be dropped somewhere along here. And so, you can send it in different ways, but there's no way to jump through it. So really, sort of the big general observation is that structured networks plus a couple of random shortcuts gives you this small world feel. So this is sort of this is a start from a model point of view, a kind of grasping, sort of seeing how real networks are structured, or how this property of real networks can arise from a couple of simple features of networks. Right, so again, this is we're talking about toy models. We want very, very simple ingredients so we can play with them and understand them and see what kind of behaviors come out. All right, so this is obviously a very fortuitous shortcut, but the distance between A and B is A now has a pal over here, and they can send their message to here and pop. Right? So this is like someone knowing someone living on the other side of the world, and then they can go click, click, click. Right? Right, so if you add a few more of these, then you can see it's going to start to fill in. Now, there are really two scales here. There's the very local scale and the global scale. So adding things randomly is just a global thing. There's nothing intermediate. So this is a bit like having a putter and a one wood, right? You're either going to go knock or just try to beat the thing to pieces, which could make for a comical round of golf. Right. Okay. Especially if you choose the wrong instrument, right? If you get too close and then you decide to... So here's the thing, if you don't know any of these addresses, this message could get to here, and you really don't know, you can see your neighbors, you don't know that this character is closer to B. You don't have a map, actually. So we'll try to deal with that later on. If you don't really have a map, you could easily just send it back over to here because all of your friends are just somewhere in space. Okay, so we have to deal with that later. All right, so let's get to this paper. So this is Watts-Strogatz, 1998. I mean, this is a very interesting little moment in science where there are two reviewers. One said, no, this is just percolation, it's boring. 20,000 citations later, I think that person is wrong. And the other one said, this is fantastic, right? So you got these two different things, which is important. I mean, if two bits of hate, it would have been all over. But it was a love and hate thing, and then a third reviewer, undisclosed name, who was external to all of them, said, this is great. So boom, it's in, gets published in Nature, which is pretty hard to do. When I say pretty hard, I mean extremely hard to do. And the thing that they had was this model plus some real data. And so they had the neural network of C. elegans, which is about 290 nodes, not a huge thing. Got your worm in there, and then they had, so this is more general. So after this paper, you get all sorts of things. This is what they had. They had the active collaboration graph, and they had a power grid. Is that right? I think so. They had 3 examples, quite different things. So there you'll see the small world networks of the English language, and so you'll see papers appearing about this, right? Every language you could look at. If you look at, say, you look at the dictionary or a thesaurus, you look at a thesaurus and say which words are connected to each other. So you have some network, what's that thing? Does it have a small world property? And we'll get to what a small world property has been quantified as. Food webs, social networks of comic book characters. So some very earnest physicists went out and found the X-Men comics and went through and saw who had, interact with him. Obviously, soap operas would do this. So, and the reason that is that so many of these very different networks have this small world property is that they have local regularity and they have randomness. They have some shortcuts somehow in them. That's not true of every graph or network in the world, but it's true of where there's some way of traveling around or moving longer distances. This is, okay, so I have this thing that papers should be apps, especially as we move more into like the big data thing. And we, short of that, we get our papers published and we have online app indices. Hilarious. But the app indices things are full of, interactive things to play around with. This is a nice version of this, not talking about this, but it was the cool thing is it is the paper we're talking about. Where is it? Hopefully this works. Yeah, so here's the original paper, 3 pages. And then there's this little guy, you can play around with some of these things, I think. So, can you do that? No. Yeah, this guy. Right? So there are a couple of little sliders. So, actually, let's see if we can explain. Can you see this okay? I'll see if I can explain can you see this? Maybe I can just expand. Enhance. Computer, enhance. That works actually, doesn't it? Okay, so, all right, good. So let's do it. So instead of a paper, you have this thing to play around with. So here's a tiny example. This is how they put. This is a total toy model. Absurdly, people thought this was a real model of social networks and kind of went and solved all sorts of things about it. It's a little too silly. But on the other hand, there were papers that appeared that was like, well, here's a nice way to hook up supercomputers based on this little model. Let's just do it, and communicate. They can communicate with just a few wires in this small world network configuration, and they synchronize really well. Right? So a lot of systems, it would be great if everything was communicating with everything. It's not always true, but it'd be really nice if we had connections everywhere. But that's very burdensome. And maybe just intellectually too much, or just maybe too many wires, right? Cost too much to put it down. But you can get a lot of a fully connected network with many, many fewer connections. And the airline network, system which functions beautifully, as we know, but the airline system is a good example of that, right? Because the hubs, really what you want is, you want a plane that goes from your house to another house, right? Any other arbitrary house in the world. Boop, that would be great. Get on the plane, you go. So we don't quite have that, but we have hubs instead, right? So you get to the hubs and they connect. So, it is still pretty good that you can get most places within 2 or 3, say in the US, within 2 or 3 flights. I think you can get very close to where you're trying to go. Again, it's kind of a golf game, right? So, you might take your flight from New York to Los Angeles. That's a huge hit. And then a little one to Santa Barbara. I don't know. And then you get in a car and drive. And that's like getting you. I really hate golf, but this is your short game out, and then you get out of the car and walk into the house, that's putting. I don't know. And it is actually true though that you can mess up, right? You didn't bring your putter. Like so you're traveling somewhere, you do everything right, you get the plane tickets, you travel, it's hard, you've packed everything, you forgot something, your socks, whatever. But you get there, you get the taxi to the place, and then you don't know the number on the street or something. Like that you can mess up that last bit. You can certainly mess up the first bit by not getting on the plane, right? But they're sort of, you're operating all these different scales, and you've got all this, you rented a car, and then you get, and you're like, oh my, I have no idea. I've got the wrong street name or something. Right? You can fail at the other end. You're stuck in the bunker. All right, damn. Must be a cricket version of this. Okay, so let's do it. So here's the idea. I got to tell you more things. So this came out of, Duncan, worked with Duncan for 6 years. So, who turns out to be Australian as well. He's from Queensland, so it's a different part of Australia. Let's see. So they're interested in synchronization, right? So this is a fun. So Strogatz has done all this great work on synchronization. Josephson, Junction, all sorts of super connectivity, all sorts of fun things. But he's thought about fireflies. We saw that as well, right? So synchronization, this great feature of the natural world. And humans, of course. We're part of the natural world. Okay, so they're thinking about this. And so they're thinking about crickets. Have we talked about this? Okay, so we're thinking about crickets. So Duncan's going fetching crickets and then putting little, you've got some little, as I recall now, in my old brain, you've got this little cricket sitting here, right? It's hanging out. It's got and you've got a little speaker, and you're chirping away over here and seeing if this guy can get entrained with the speaker, right? So you're trying to synchronize the cricket with playing around various ways like this. And then I started to think, well, what if we had a couple of crickets, and they were, they had little headphones on, and this cricket could only hear this cricket, and right? What if we had a network of them? Would they all synchronize? We know they're pretty good at, if they're in a team, they get the whole chirp thing going, and because if you misfire on your chirp, you have to back it off a little bit, and then you get your chirp in sync, right? And everyone's trying to do that at the same time. You can kind of go all over the place. I mean, people are good, especially in Europe, I guess, where it happens. Again, another nature or science paper about this. Clapping, right? Which, right, generally in Europe, I think people clap all together. Yeah. So walking, yeah. And so with soldiers, you have to break stride because you'll fall through the bridge. Yeah, right. Yeah, that's funny to watch. Yeah, the people do that very much. Also, just wear the same clothes, which is spectacular. Yeah, really interesting. Yeah, sorry. Human watching is fun. Let's see. So, all right, you've got your cricket. So they thought about this, right? And then they stopped getting crickets out of trees because it's kind of hard, and the headphone thing didn't work out. So they thought, well, let's just do it on a computer because that's biological enough. And so there were various attempts by Duncan to come up with a little version of this that would say, well, we've got everyone. What if they're all connected? What if they're connected in a really structured way? Are they going to synchronize? So synchronization was the question, but then it became, well, let me just say, then it became about all sorts of things, like disease spreading, and also the whole this Milgram small world thing appeared later on. Someone saw their talk and just said, this reminds me of such and such. Like, that sounds like a great name for the paper.
Couldn't they also do an orchestra of violinists? So they have headphones and they're trying to do things scales a bit somewhat different
Yeah,
scales?
that's interesting. So actually, there was a project in the very first version of this course which was about synchronization within an orchestra. And of course, you have a conductor which is controlling the whole thing. But there is an orchestra. It's called anyone that doesn't have one. There's a famous one that doesn't have one.
Trans-Siberian Orchestra?
No, it's something more like Morpheus.
Yes.
Yeah, red pill, blue pill guy kind of thing. Is that right? Oh, anyway, so, but it is hard when you're in an orchestra, when there's a lot of noise, you don't really, you have to sort of just coordinate with the people around you, which that's why it's good to have a conductor. But it can all go wrong in interesting ways. So you could definitely do that, I think, especially without the conductor, because the conductor, is exactly this thing that we're saying makes it uninteresting. I mean, it's still a beautiful thing, right? But uninteresting in terms of a emergent story, right? Because there's centralized control. And the musicians might hate the conductor, and then things get interesting. That never happens. Okay, so let's see. So the idea is, this is what, after many experiments or conceptions, the idea was, okay, let's just make a ring, complete abstraction, and connect nodes to the k nearest neighbors. So you always want at least the ones on the side, otherwise the whole thing's going to fall to bits. And the way this is, I can't remember if this is what it was in the paper. This is k equals 2 would be just that. K equals 4 is these ones, and k equals 6 is this. This is very nicely done. So in the next, we'll point to it with this. In the next one, you'll see all of the gray ones are all the links, right? So everyone's got their local neighborhood filled in. And then you start to rewire them. So that's one extreme. That's going to be this kind of base of the network. You rewire them. So you go around to each vertex, and you take all the edges that are pointing in one direction, right? So it'd be this guy, and with probability p, you pick up this end and randomly locate it somewhere else. So that's what's happened here. So this one gets picked up, and you randomly choose from all the locations, and in this little example, it ends up there. So now you have so p equals 0, you're left with this, nothing changes. P equals 1, every link is rewired. It's not a perfect random network, right? Because that would require you to pick up each edge completely and allocate their ends to, right? So it's rewiring one end. So it's a little bit of a funny version of a random network, but it's highly random. There are concerns with the thing splitting, so that you may end up with like an isolated node. So you have to worry about that a little bit. And then you just keep going with that. And this is, right. So they're all being rewired, blah, blah, blah. And some of them didn't get rewired. Right. So this is, so you start with this one, and this is the final network. And then you test you test these networks, test them for various things. So spreading is one thing. You put down a little proto-disease and let it spread. How fast does it take? And so that's a dynamic sort of thing. But we definitely got stuck on geometry. So the first thing would be, well, what's the average distance between nodes? What's the average shortest path? Right, so you've got some average shortest path here. And so if you imagine if it's not n equals 12, but n equals 10,000, and you just have k equals 4, then it's very much a big ring, and the average shortest path is going to be fairly large. Let's say 2,500, right? So, so if you take one node, on average they're 5,000 away from this one, 2,500 away from that one. But this is, now because of the property of random networks, you start to get slightly more chocolate. Eat it all, people. Okay. you start to get the average shortest path drops down. All right. Now, one thing that gets destroyed, so average shortest path is going down. At the same time, it's a really terrific thing. So there's a little bit of clustering here, right? So this node here has a friend here who also knows. So these two are friends. A little bit of clustering. Some of their neighborhood is filled in, and these two characters here, they're friends as well. So out of the 4, choose 2, which is positive integer. 4 choose 2. 6. 4 factorial divided by 2 factorial times 2. Yeah. Okay, let's do it. 6. So there's 6 possible friendships, and there are 3 that exist. This one, and this one. So the clustering is a half. It starts off at a half. And we'll just say that's C0, right? We'll just say that's the clustering that you get at p equals 0. And right, we'll start with that as being the initial clustering, and then see how it decays, because now it's falling apart. The local friendships are falling apart. So clustering decays. So as you increase p, you go from a really ordered thing to a random thing. You go from one with high local clustering to low local clustering, average shortest paths to low shortest paths. Now you've lost the thing you wanted, right? So you want the clustering, you lose it. You want shortest paths, and you get it. So the question is there somewhere in the middle, which is a happy place? And there is, because I'm telling you the story, right? That's how stories work. So here we go. Oh yeah, wow, this is great. Nice work, guy. Look at this. So here's p equals 0, unchanged. Here's p equals 1. It's a big mess. And there's a sort of, you can see it getting more and more random as you increase p. Terrific. That's a great paper. Okay, so order to disorder, very nice. The whole kind of feels good. What else is he going to give us? Yeah? Shortest paths, all right, so here's some shortest paths. Boom. Shortest path between these two is here. Shortest path between these two, these are both the same network, is actually these 3 hops. So one of the things you'll notice about this is a bad way to play golf, right? This is pretty weird. It's going to be weird playing golf on this thing. That's fine. That's okay. Well, it's over there, right? I know this dude, so that's fine. But this is person A, this is person B. That's going to be hard to find. And so this turns out to be true. So this is a little downer that I'll tell you about this whole thing, even though it's 27, that they aren't navigable. So that second, they have the property of being small worlds, which we'll define, but that's geometric, but not the algorithmic aspect, which is they aren't navigable. So if you say, I want to get, which is exactly what these experiments and whatever these other things are that I've showed you, Reddit trying to find people suggest it has. Okay, so here's an example of clustering, right? Blah blah blah. You can play around with this. It's very nice. Very nice. Okay. And then this is really the upshot. Yeah. Cool. Really cool. Okay, this is good, even better. So this is the number of nodes in the network. This is the average shortest path length is growing, which makes sense. This is for the p equals 0 case. That's just growing and growing and growing, right? You're getting a bigger and bigger ring, so people are further and further apart from each other. The clustering stays the same at 3/4, so that's going to be something to figure out. I said a sixth. That's not right. All right, I'll have to think about that. This is the randomized version, where the average shortest path grows very slowly. This is the logarithmic growth with the size of the network. Clustering decays, right? So it's going to 0. So these are the features of the random one. Low average short paths, but poor clustering. So this is kind of not social. This is social, this is not social. This is social, high clustering in the structured one, but then they're too far apart, and this is not social. So you want a blend of both, and that's this, cool, yeah. There's more stuff in here, very nice. So here's sort of the big picture that comes out of the whole thing. Good, I'll just tell you this. So it's been normalized so that they both start at 1. This is the, in red you have the average shortest path length as a function of p, the rewiring probability, normalized by the average shortest path length when there's no rewiring. So that's why it starts at 1. So as we start to rewire, the average shortest path length goes down. Right? The more random, the closer things are together. Clustering holds on for a while and then drops. So eventually when it's completely rewired, clustering's been obliterated. Now this is on a log scale here, so there's a bit of a funny aspect to this. This is a log scale. This is 10 times that probability there, and then another factor of 10, another factor of 10, another factor of 10. So the window is there, but it is 2 orders of magnitude roughly here, where you have, so let's see, if you have a network in here, then it has high clustering and low average path length. And these are the super duper small world networks. This is the small world network property, is that this is, as stated in this original paper and then believed and put on t-shirts and taken to be gospel by those who followed, they're quantified in a really nice way. And it's the geometric property. It has what you kind of expect that these networks must have for them to be searchable, which is it doesn't take too long to get around in terms of hops, low shortest path lengths, low average shortest path lengths, but there's still human social kinds of things. There's clustering there. So the game then became, okay, let's take a real network, we'll do that shuffling thing that I talked about, let's randomize it and mess around with it. What's the equivalent random network look like? And so the equivalent random network would always have low average path lengths and destroyed clustering. It wouldn't have any clustering. So you'd measure your clustering in your real one and its average shortest path length and say, oh, look at this. It's in this game. So the great thing was, most interesting networks appeared to be in this realm. The work that comes after it, which I'll start talking about next Tuesday, is about figuring out the other half of this, the really important other aspect, which is the algorithmic side of things. Turns out these networks, and it's just a toy network and it showed all these great things, are not navigable. You can't find your way around them. They have almost what you want, but we took them all to be, small world, but they don't have this property that we'll figure out next. Okay, coolness.